Okay, just to recap, this meeting is being recorded. This is our December 14th meeting. Our presenter today is going to be Jeromy Johnson with Bluebird Bus with New York Bus Sales. So is everybody purchasing kerosene all right? Nobody's having any problems with kerosene? I know there was an issue before, and I think they've got it in stock now, so we're able to cut our fuel. Like I said, we're also using K100 in our fuels. I know a lot of you guys are as well. There's other products out there that work also, but we're using K100 at this point. It's too bad, but we did have to cancel our Christmas party. It was supposed to be the beginning of the week or the beginning of this month. It was going to be our first in-person one since COVID, but what we're going to do is we're going to try to plan something for the summer. We want to do like a clam bake or something, and we'll try to push that along. Our last meeting was held on November 23rd. Cody Shamrock with Leonard Bus Sales presented on the international electric bus and the safety that needs to be taken when working on it. And their bus uses air disc brakes, which is common on the buses today, but they moved that right over to their electric bus. There's 2 charge ports. There's only one charge port, but it could be in either the front or the back of the bus. There's only one, and it's an option. Now, one of the things that they were talking about was that they have 2 different charging options, AC or DC, which I thought was kind of a neat add-on to that. They said the DC charging charges way faster than the AC charging. So that'll be something to look into as we move along. Jeff Corey, how you doing? This meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want your picture on, just turn your camera off. Let's see. The optimal temperature for their batteries is 68 degrees to 70 degrees. Now, they do use a coolant circulating around the batteries to keep them at that temperature. That's both during the summer and in the winter. Orange wires are the high voltage wires, and they have fault detection, a circuit built into them. So they will tell you when they're starting to fail. There's actually a light on the dash, he was saying. They have 2 different battery setups. There's a 3-pack for normal, and the extended range is 6-pack, which is just extra more batteries. Their coolant, it's a 60-month, 150,000 mile coolant, and that needs to be replaced. That's what cools the batteries and heats the inside of the bus. They use a 470 horse 6-phase motor to drive that's the main motor for driving the bus. And a 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty is standard. So, and that you can pay for, of course, an extended warranty on top of that. So today's presentation will be, of course, by Jeromy Johnson with New York Bus Sales, and he's going to present on the Bluebird electric bus. So go ahead, Jeromy.
Well, hey, thanks, Dan. I'm Jeromy Johnson with New York Bus Sales, Director of Sales. I've been with the company for just about 15 years now. Gone through the paces of propane years ago, diesel, gasoline, and onto electric. I always start and end the presentation. Electric buses are coming. We still offer gasoline. We still offer diesel. We still offer propane. But from an educational standpoint, we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the product, knowledge, background, so that once we actually start deploying these units, everybody has a good understanding on the product itself to make sure that we're operating efficiently and maximize the uptime. So bear with me. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Everybody can see that? Hold on a second here. Let's do this. There we go. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, perfect. All right, so a little bit of background here. I'm going to turn my camera off just so I'm going to share a couple screens here. All right, so a little bit of background. If you can see my cursor, we're New York Bus Sales, located in central New York is our corporate office, 4 locations across the state. We're owned by Superbird Capital. Superbird Capital owns 4 dealerships in the Northeast, 1 in Quebec, 1 in Ontario, 1 in New York, and we also cover the state of Connecticut. So a little bit of background. Back in Quebec, the Canadian government actually mandated the transition to all electric school buses back in July of 2021. So I say July of 2021. So they've been in the trenches for a while. Canadian government realized it was really aggressive, so they moved it to November of 2021. So what happened as soon as that transition took place, our parent company actually established Girardin Energy, which is a bunch of electrical engineers, strictly design and implementation of fleet electrification for school buses. Top right corner is Cummins. Everybody knows the name Cummins. They are our powertrain partner for the Type C and D electric school bus. Again, having that network of large manufacturers getting involved in the electrification process really speaks volumes as to where the industry is going. And obviously Microbird. Microbird also has a Type A product offering for a 30 passenger. We'll get into those details, but just wanted to give you a little bit of background on everybody that's kind of involved in this process. So again, as I mentioned earlier, alternative fuels aren't new to Bluebird. We actually developed the first propane back in the early 90s. And then once we went to liquid injection, kind of the second generation was 2007. Gasoline was reintroduced into the market back in about 2016. But Bluebird has by far the most electric school buses on the road, over 30,000, operated by 2,500 districts across the country. So as I said before, we also offer diesel, gasoline, propane. This is just the second offer, the next offering in Bluebird's product line. Entry level is still the gasoline operated by Ford. Diesel is still operated by Cummins. The EV powertrain, as I mentioned, is also supported by Cummins. So this isn't really new for Bluebird. Bluebird actually developed the first all-electric school bus back in the early 90s. Then they built 4 of them for the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, actually used them as shuttle vehicles. Again, it's not new technology. It's just the technology is now proven where it's more realistic to be operated day to day. So again, that was back in 1994. So that takes us to where we are today. Given Bluebird's history in alternative fuels, the New York or U.S. Department of Energy actually approached Bluebird back in 2016 to look at the viability of what they call onboard bidirectional charging. So what that means is actually taking the energy that's stored in the batteries using hardware that's on the bus to discharge the energy, either put it back into the grid, power a building, or put it back into something else to energize it. So that was what really kickstarted Bluebird. And then back in 2017, they actually deployed the first electric bus in Reno for a show, and then actually delivered it in 2018 out in California. Ever since then, we've made a lot of adjustments, product changes, which we're now on our second generation electric, new thermal management system. We'll get into those details. New maintenance-free scrolling air compressor, some of those details. But again, similar to Dan mentioned, Cody Shamrock presented last week, level 2 or DC fast charging. The same applies to Bluebird. We can do both, which means you could take it to any public charger, level 2 or DC fast charge, and utilize that charging infrastructure. Kind of unique to Bluebird, we have a Type C offering on the top of that screen, the Bluebird Vision. We also do the Type D All-American, the exact same components between the two product lines. The location of those components are just a little bit different just because of the real estate that's located under the bus. 155 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's like your, we'll call it fuel tank size. They say range of up to 120 miles. Realistically, you're probably going to get closer to 100. Same thing applies to the Type D. As I mentioned, we also do a Microbird 30 passenger fully electric vehicle on the Ford E450 chassis only, done by a company called EcoTuned, which is actually majority owned by Microbird as well. They're a Ford QVM, so everybody's familiar with our Ford gasoline product line, that Roush is a qualified vehicle modifier for Ford. EcoTuned has that same access to Ford's PCMs, so it is as OEM of an EV unit as you're going to find in the market today. So we're going to cover really that Type C, because that's the majority of what we sell, electric vehicle. So this is a breakdown on those component locations. We'll go around the top. So similar to what Dan mentioned with the IC offering, thermal management system that's coolant, that heats and cools those batteries. Everybody in the industry today is using lithium-ion batteries. It's not unique technology for everyone. Composition is a little bit different for everybody, but again, it's lithium-ion batteries across the board. That thermal management system is actually located underneath the hood. What it does is maintains coolant temperature in the batteries. All of those components, inverters, are controlled by that coolant. We have 14 total batteries between the frame rails, 2 strings of 7. So let's say if one of them throws a fault, the other string would still be operable and gives you 50% of that range that you initially had. We keep going around the top. So our air compressor is actually located behind the duals on the curb side. We're on our 2nd generation. It's now a scrolling compressor. We'll get into those details in a minute. The electric drive motor, when we say the larger manufacturers are getting involved, manufactured by a company called Sumo, now owned by Dana. Everybody knows Dana for their axles. Again, those larger companies are seeing that transition to EV and getting involved. High voltage module in a contained steel box. There's a couple of different components in there. One is a DC to DC inverter, acts as a 400 amp alternator. The other thing that's in this box is when we're charging with a level 2 charger, charge with AC alternating current, converts it to DC power to store it in the batteries. That's in this, as well as the distribution unit, which basically, once one of the components demands energy, goes from the batteries into this distribution unit and then out to the component that it services. We do still have a 12-volt system on there. Battery box is the same location, 1 battery instead of the typical 3 we're used to. Power steering pump, or electric power steering pump. We're also on our 2nd generation, manufactured by Cummins. We're trying to maintain the exact same pressures that we use with internal combustion to make it consistent amongst our product lines. So again, you'll see the same pressures for that power steering system. Lastly is low voltage. That's basically they call it a VCU, similar to an ECU. Obviously, there's no engine, so it's just the vehicle control unit. 12 volt and 24 volt systems are in there, and we'll get into some images that go through all those details. But this is that Dana TM4 Sumo motor, make model, same thing as the International. It's a 6-phase, this is the inverter with a 6-phase. You'll actually see, if you can see my cursor, each one of these little plugs represents one of the phases. What it does is it takes that power from the DC through this inverter, gives it the energy. You'll almost feel it pulsate if you really get light on the throttle going through those phases of the motor. Roughly 2,400 foot-pounds of torque. So when we compare that to internal combustion, they're running about 450, exponentially more torque out of the electric powertrain. No transmission, direct drive. So this is actually an image looking over the top of it. Direct drive here into that rear axle. Same 529 rear axle ratio. We just flip it upside down and direct drive. So this is the actual image overhead again, now with those same orange high voltage lines. It's an industry standard in the automotive world to go with anything that is considered high voltage has to have that blaze orange line. Similar to what Dan had mentioned earlier, what there is it's called a high voltage interlock loop. So if there's any sense in that system of a voltage drop in one of those high voltage lines, within milliseconds, it shuts that system down and actually grounds that high voltage back into the batteries. So again, it's a self-grounding system back to the batteries if any of these orange lines are severed during an accident or whatever the situation may be. Any questions along the way, just feel free to ask. So again, this is the drive motor, maintenance free. You'll actually see over here where you can see my cursor. Coolant flows through there as well as heating and cooling that electric motor. Really, the only maintenance you're going to see on this is torquing those bolts anytime you bring it in for a PM or checking for coolant leaks. The other piece to mention with that is if this unit ever had to be towed, can be towed from the front axle or the rear axle. But if you're going to tow it with the rear tires on the ground, you got to disconnect that drive shaft, because what's happening is that electric motor is still spinning without coolant flowing through it. You're going to overheat that motor. So again, can be towed front axle, rear axle. Just be mindful that if it's from the front, disconnect that drive shaft. This is that second generation power steering pump that we talked about. Same thing, same flow and pressure that we use for internal combustion, powered by a 380 volt motor that runs a constant RPM. Every component on the vehicle is going to have an inverter. It has to have an inverter because we have DC energy stored in the batteries. Need to convert it to AC to run all of these components. This is that second generation air compressor. First generation actually had 3 quarts of oil in it that had to be maintained every 10,000 miles. This is now a maintenance-free scrolling compressor. So a little image on the right. I don't know if you're familiar with a scrolling air compressor. What it does is an intake, and then there's actually a rotor and a stator, compresses the air itself, and then puts it out the top. Also, as Dan had mentioned, with air disc brakes, we can go either way with drum or disc. We recommend disc brakes for 2 reasons. One, all of those components are lighter. So the lighter we can make that vehicle, the more efficient it is. The second reason is they require less air. So the less air they're demanding for the braking components, the less the air compressor runs, in turn making it more efficient. So again, drum or disc, we just recommend disc brakes for electric. As soon as it leaves this air compressor, it goes to the exact same AD9 or ADIP air dryer that you're used to. Axles are the same, braking systems are the same. From a maintenance standpoint, it's identical to what you're working on today. Any questions on that one? Okay, power steering reservoir, very simple, same location as it is in internal combustion, right in front of the radiator. Pretty self-explanatory on this piece. Batteries themselves. So these are actually manufactured just outside of Detroit, Michigan, by a company called Exalt. This is the Expand battery pack. They call it Expand because we can basically pigtail the units together. This is one of those series of 7 batteries. Again, coolant flows through those. You'll actually see those ports on the bottom, inlet, outlet. We have an option for an insulation that goes around the batteries and manifolds themselves to help maintain that 70-degree temperature that those batteries want to be year-round. Each battery does weigh about 170 pounds. So the unit itself actually weighs about 800 pounds more than internal combustion, a minimal weight difference. That's one of the big questions that we get is, what's the weight difference on a diesel gasoline to electric? Honestly, it's not much. The other misinformation we hear a lot is you're going to need a different lift in your facilities to maintain electric buses. Not the case. You can use whatever you want because of that weight rating of only 800 pounds more. Twin post lift, drive on lift, it doesn't make a difference, whatever you're more comfortable with. Again, in these batteries, we're talking about 700 volts across all of the batteries when they're fully charged. This is an image from the top. So those are those battery packs in an aluminum housing between the frame rails and also tucked up as high as we can get it. This was the first generation image. All of this routing of airlines harnesses is actually run center routing right across the top of this cross members. Cleans it up a lot, less issues on chafing through harnesses through that cross member. As we mentioned earlier, 19.2 level 2 charging. We can actually go a little bit lower than that if you want, but in the school bus world, 19.2 level 2 makes the most sense. That's that top piece of that. So basically Chevy, Volt, Nissan Leaf, everybody but Tesla in the US is using that 1772 connector. Now to utilize DC fast charging, we use this top round piece of the 1772 and then the bottom piece. So again, all we're doing is taking direct current from the charger itself right into the batteries, utilizing both of those pins. This is an image of the unit before the body's dropped on it. This is the curb side of the vehicle. So left to right, the right side of that screen would be the front of the bus. These are MSD switches, manual safety disconnects. Both of these disconnects need to be disabled to completely isolate the energy into the batteries. If you only pull one of these, the other battery will still be energized and that system will not be shut down. Now, these are also access panels here in these images. You guys can see my cursor, right? All right, so these are actually access panels to get inside of those batteries. Honestly, a visual inspection, one of the biggest things is coolant leaks. Coolant flows through all those. Outside of that, maintenance-free components on those batteries, just an inspection. So the projected life on batteries is 10 to 12 years, warranted 8 years, 125,000 miles. What that looks at is also energy throughput. So on a diesel side, they look at idle time. On the battery side, they're looking at energy throughput. So 160,000 kilowatt hours of energy throughput through those batteries at 80% battery degradation. So that's actually what that warranty is covering. So when we look at the batteries themselves, they have to go through ISO standards. They actually submerge them in water, run a wooden stake through them, drop test. All of these are the tests that have been done and certified for these Exalt batteries. This is that high voltage module that we talked about, mounted on the frame around the driver's side. This is that distribution unit. DC to DC converter acts as that 400 amp alternator. Again, just sitting there idle won't do anything. You actually need to be out running that vehicle to charge that 12 volt system, just like an alternator would. And then on the left side as well is that taking the energy as AC, distributing it to those components to operate any of those components that we need. This is the low voltage side. So as we mentioned earlier, 12 volt and 24 volt, basically the VCU, similar to an ECU, that's going to maintain all of those components on anything high voltage on the power side or on the powertrain side. Okay, this is our second generation thermal management system. First generation had two 12.5 kilowatt heaters. Now we have three 12.5 kilowatt heaters. Two of those heaters are dedicated to battery temperature maintenance. The third one is strictly regulating cabin temperature. So worst case, as we're running down the road, if we get into a situation where battery state of charge is getting low, it's going to cut the cabin heat and maintain battery temperature to make sure that that unit's going to make it back to whatever the destination is. So this is the same radiator that we're using in our Ford powertrain, gas and propane. Second generation, it was initially designed actually for Southern California. So what happened was 12 months out of the year, we were cycling coolant through that radiator just to heat it back up again in the Northeast. So with our second generation, we've rerouted the coolant. In the wintertime, it's not going to go through that radiator, again, making it more efficient, better range. The other thing you're going to notice is on this, behind the radiator, there's actually 4 cooling fans as opposed to 1. The logic for that is it's more efficient. If we really need to cool that down, all 4 fans are going to come on automatically. If we need to cool it just a little bit, we're only going to activate 2 of them. That's the logic on 4 versus 1. Everything with EV is about efficiency. Again, second generation thermal management, there's actually 5 different pumps to activate different things. First one is going to be the AC chargers, DC converters, and then the drive motor inverter. That's that pump that operates those. The drive motor itself, high voltage batteries. Located in a different section is pump number 4. And then 5 is the body heater exchangers themselves. So each pump is operating a different piece of that coolant system. Also within that coolant system, once every 5 years, service interval, flush the coolant, and refill. 18 gallons, but again, Cummins has developed a similar to Cummins Insight. They've got diagnostic software for the EV side specifically. They're going to actually activate these pumps in a specific series to ensure the entire line is drained, and then also a proper procedure to refill that coolant to make sure we're limiting bubbles and also filling that coolant up to its recommended levels. Okay, so on the thermal management system as well, this is an image from the top side with the hood open. This is the chilling system, freon flowing through that specifically to maintain battery temperature only. So when you look under the hood, you're actually going to see 2 coolant reservoirs. It's one coolant system with 2 loops, one specific to batteries. The other runs everything else. And again, this chiller itself is specific to the batteries. Here's those 2 coolant reservoirs we were talking about. This is the battery coolant loop, and then this is body heat, high voltage, and all those other components. Again, just orange decks cool, 18 gallons in the entire system. Does come with a standard coolant filter, actually mounted inside the frame rail, basically just under the driver's seat. Visual inspection here. So as you can see that little display, as we get into that red, time to change the coolant, drop it, throw a new one on. Honestly, a very simple system. Again, when we talk from a maintenance standpoint, oil changes, it is pretty much coolant is really the big piece to look at on these. So when we look at those differences, no engine oil, there's no intake, which means there's no air filter, no transmission, so we have no transmission filter or fluid, no fuel, obviously, so there's no fuel filters, fuel water separators, any of those details. From an emission standpoint, no def heads, O2 sensors, emissions components, all of that goes away. So when we trying right now to track the data, but it looks like about an 80% reduction in maintenance costs from internal combustion to EV, just because, again, less moving parts. But again, we have same axles, same braking systems, same 12-volt side that technicians are used to today. So when we look at dash instrumentation itself, this looks just like the same dash that we use on the internal combustion side. Biggest thing you're going to notice is this red gauge, or the red circle around this gauge. That's our efficiency gauge. So when we talk driver training, we're going to make sure that they're watching this gauge. The more in the yellow they are, the more they're consuming energy. Once we get below a 90% state of charge, that's when regenerative braking automatically kicks in. Now we say 90% state of charge because we don't want to overcharge the batteries. So as that driver takes their foot off the throttle, you're actually going to feel that bus hold back similar to a VGT. ABS, again, overrides all of those components as soon as they apply the brakes. If it starts to slip, ABS takes over. But again, as they're recouping more of that energy back into the batteries, this gauge will go further and further into the green. So if we can train drivers, I know sometimes that's difficult, but again, if we can train the drivers to get as efficient as we can in operating these vehicles, we have a real possibility of hitting that 100-mile, potentially 110-mile range on a full charge. The other piece is this LED display. What I did was I took a zoom out of that. It's actually going to show us how many miles to empty. What that is that's actually an algorithm that calculates what heaters are operating, what components, what energy consumption is, and actually tailors that to how many miles that vehicle can travel until it reaches what the batteries tell you is empty. We're actually never really going to fully deplete the batteries. They're actually going to fully depleted batteries in our world is actually 20%. It won't go below that because once we hit zero, they're basically just paperweights. So again, that's automatically calculated based on what components are running. Now, if the bus is connected to a charger, bus won't move either. You're going to see charger connected. You're also going to see how long until a full charge. So right now, just based on the information we have, when it says 4.7 hours, we already know that's connected to either a level 2 charger, just because of the charge time, or a lower rated DC fast charger. Now, if we're charging at 60 kilowatts an hour, 155 kilowatt hour battery pack, we could charge that thing from a fully depleted battery to fully charged in about 2.5 hours. With level 2 charger, depending on the output, fully depleted to a full charge would be about 8 hours. So again, we have the same dash design. We've got some different icons that are going to pop up depending on if there's a fault. Top of this screen is a green image. That basically just means that vehicle's enabled. It's ready to put into gear and operate forwards or backwards. Again, same check engine light. Now you're going to see some specific high battery temps. You see a little turtle here, which is limited performance mode. So similar to being derated for an emissions code, EV has that exact same possibility. Let's say there's a high temperature situation. That's automatically going to try to cool that coolant system down using that derate mode. And again, we'll go through some of those, but most specifically for early on, if there were a fault in charging, you're going to get this red plug come on the dash once you plug it in. If it's operating efficiently and taking a charge, you're going to see the green light as soon as you plug the charger in. On the diagnostic side, on these right-hand panels, exact same access you have on internal combustion, just specific to the EV powertrain, whether it be the powertrain itself, you can still access the ABS, body control module, multiplex modules, those details. So again, when you look at EV component maintenance intervals, we are continually updating this like we have in the past. As we deploy units, tracking data, as fluids change, we're going to update this so that you guys can have access to what it actually takes.
Jeromy, on the
Yes,
on the maintenance side, what are like our garage techs going to be qualified to do, and what are your techs that you guys would have to do on the maintenance side?
That's an excellent question. So at this point right now, if it's anything high voltage side, if there's an orange wire running to it, that is Cummins specifically. So we use Cummins as the example. So what happens is as soon as we order a bus from Bluebird with an EV powertrain, Bluebird automatically notifies Cummins, New York Bus Sales ordered X number of units. Here's the body numbers. Cummins contacts us and they say, where are these units being deployed, to make sure we have a technician certified to work on it. So let's take the Horseheads location down in the southern tier. They currently don't have anybody certified at that location because there's no EV units in the area. Now, the one on Railroad Ave, they have a Cummins certified tech at that location out in the Albany area because there's been some units out there. We actually have one of our demo units is in Ravenna right now anyways, so they're familiar on when units are deployed. From a dealer standpoint, I'll be honest with you, our techs are not currently certified as Cummins works through that Insight programming. There's actually a week-long training process. They've got 2 EV-specific locations for on-site training. One's in Indiana, the other one's out in Portland, Oregon. So as of right now, anything 12-volt side, body side, exact same operating procedures that you guys work on today with internal combustion. High voltage side, as we progress and get more units out there, there will be more and more training on high voltage for technicians.
So my techs wouldn't be able to work on a high side. So on a maintenance, like a yearly maintenance, interval, we would have to have your techs perform those services, correct?
So they're real. It's a good question. So on the high voltage side, the only maintenance interval, honestly, is that 5-year coolant flush. So really, we don't have to worry about anything high voltage until that 5-year mark.
Okay. My other question is, go back a couple of screens ago on the D rate when you said the batteries got hot. What about when the batteries are too cold? Is it D rate on that also?
Good question. So it won't derate. So we're going to do two things. Once that coolant temperature or the battery temperature is below operating temperature, they will operate normally. It's just going to demand a lot more energy to heat the batteries. So what we do is, as that bus is plugged in charging overnight, it's called battery preconditioning. Part of the energy from the charger is going to go towards charging the batteries. The other part is actually going to go towards activating that thermal management system and getting and maintaining the batteries at that 70-degree mark.
Now that also incorporates with what kind of charger you have also, correct?
Yeah, so it will do it with both level 2 or DC fast charging. That preconditioning is applicable to both types of chargers.
Okay, because the chargers we have here, once they hit 98%, they shut down and they don't restart. So then we have no heating or cooling to the batteries.
Yeah, so that might be New York to, again, specific to Bluebird. It's that battery conditioning as it's plugged in. Let's say it's 0 degrees outside. With that bus plugged in, we're maintaining coolant temperature. So it's not going to consume a lot of energy. All it's going to do is, as that coolant or the batteries reach that temperature threshold, we're going to throw a little bit of energy at it to maintain temperature and then shut it off. And then again, it'll fluctuate between that temperature range we want to maintain. That way, once the driver gets in the morning, batteries are up to temperature, disconnect the bus, and you can take off.
All right, thank you.
Yep. The other thing that we have as well is, with the batteries plugged in, because coolant temperature is already where it needs to be, you could go in the old days where you go in and start the buses in the morning, you could actually turn the ignition to the on position, turn your internal heaters on, so the cabin temperature is up to temperature before the bus leaves, utilizing energy from the charger instead of from the batteries. Again, another way to maximize that range. Good questions. So on this side, again, as I mentioned, Cummins has very similar to Insight, Preventec, EV specific. There's also telematics involved. Real time, we could see state of charge, energy usage, fault codes, diagnostics. All of those benefits are actually there for your fleet managers. Now, there's also two sides to that telematics piece. The charging side as well, using a smart charger when that bus is plugged in. Your fleet managers also have access to, when it's plugged in, what the state of charge is, if there's a fault, what charge time is, how long until a full charge. But also, if a driver forgets to plug that bus in, you can actually set it for a fault that bus 1, 2, 3 is back at 9 o'clock. It's 9:15. It's not plugged in yet. There could potentially be an issue. So again, two separate pieces of telematics involved on the EV side, the Cummins powertrain side, but also telematics if you use it on the charger side. So we had, as I mentioned earlier, we cover the state of Connecticut. We delivered an electric unit out there in September of 21. There was actually an issue with the 12-volt side. Charging manufacturer actually called the customer before the customer even knew it and said, hey, you've got an issue with your 12-volt battery. You need to get it checked out because it won't actually start. So again, as we progress, electronics are really helping on the maintenance side. Just another piece to help that transition. So back to the basics on safety. What do we need to do when we're working on these vehicles specific for EV? Obviously, park it on a flat surface, set the park brake, make sure that the bus is not plugged into the charger when we're working on them. We're going to check the cluster, as we mentioned, go through the fault codes, make sure there's no active codes, turn the ignition key off and take it out of the bus. So that first thing that does is deactivates that 12-volt system. So that high voltage system needs a signal from the 12-volt to activate. The second you take the key out, you've removed the potential to activate 12-volt to send a signal to high volt. The second piece to that is inside that battery box on the driver's side is a disconnect switch for the 12-volt system. As soon as you turn that 12-volt system off, you've done the exact same thing that you would removing the key, disabled the 12-volt, so you can't get a signal to the high voltage to activate. It also, when you're charging, requires that 12-volt signal to accept the charge on the high voltage side. So you need 12-volt power when charging the bus, again, to accept that signal to take the charge. Then again, you're going to set the wheel chocks, whatever your standard procedures are. Lockout tagout, again, is really critical for the high voltage side. And then those MSDs, manual safety disconnects, need to be pulled when you're working on the high voltage side. As I mentioned earlier, both MSDs need to be disconnected to isolate power for the high voltage side. Just one disconnect, you'd still have that voltage in those batteries. So here's those images again. Top side is just your ignition. Key out, taken away. Make sure you put it in a secure place. Don't just leave it on the seat. You know what happens. You leave it on the seat, somebody throws power back to it. Two different disconnect switch styles in the battery box. Doesn't matter what it is. Turn to the off position. And again, MSD. So there's actually going to be two separate releases on each MSD. So the first one, you push that little pin, pull the black lever out to the first location. It's about a 20-degree turn. And then the second one is pull it out to a 90-degree turn and give it a pull, and it will fully release that. So just basically two separate security measures to make sure you actually want to release that safety disconnect switch. And then the big piece with this is 10 minutes after you disconnect it, all of that residual energy in those high voltage lines should be out of those lines and safe to work on. Now, it's not going to be 9 minutes, 59 seconds. It depends, honestly, on voltage, usage, and life. But again, we say 10 minutes before you work on that high voltage after you've removed those MSDs. And so again, that's the bus itself. But again, we're trying to maximize uptime, maximize service efforts. Multiple locations across the New York, between New York Bus Sales and Cummins. As I mentioned, this location for Cummins down in Horseheads, they don't have a certified EV technician at the moment. Buffalo does, Syracuse did, and actually now they're working on it again. Albany does, as well as down in New York. So when we talk warranty coverage, I know, Dan, you'd mentioned on the presentation last week for the IC side, it was 5-year, 100,000 mile. Exact same warranty out of Cummins, with the exception of the batteries themselves. Batteries are 125,000 miles, 8 years. As we talked, that 160,000 kilowatt hours of energy throughput. So let's say a bus goes out in the morning. It's rated at 3,000 cycles for the life of the vehicle. It goes out in the morning and only travels 20 miles, and then you recharge it. Not considered a full cycle for a charge, only because you're doing a percentage of that. On the microbird side, a little bit different. Electric powertrain and batteries are 5 years.
Hey, I have a question on your warranty there.
Yep.
If we're using that to power the grid and we're putting power back, does that count against our 160,000 kilowatt hours?
Yes, sir. That's why we're trying to be realistic. Anytime those batteries are charged and discharged, that's a battery cycle. So we really need to be mindful when everybody uses this vehicle to grid technology and it's a revenue source. The bus can do it today, but just be mindful on what it actually does on the impact of your battery warranty. Good question. This is just some funding opportunities we're trying to track. Everybody saw that EPA funds as well, up to $375,000 for priority, or $285,000, depending on what you qualify for. If it's under $26,000, non-priority is a little bit different funding level, which also covered some infrastructure itself, hardware and chargers. The other piece that isn't really talked about yet is first responder training. So obviously, again, we're going to train technicians before we deliver. I mentioned it already a couple of times, is driver training. Make sure they know how to operate those vehicles, how to drive it efficiently. That last piece is technician training. Bluebird already has that technician training out there, what to do for first responders, not just first responders, but also tow truck drivers, how to disconnect the drive shaft, all of the things involved, what happens if it's submerged in water. All of those things are covered. We delivered a unit out in Buffalo probably, I don't know, 4 months ago or so. Before the district put that vehicle on the road, they wanted any fire district that vehicle was going to go through trained on it. So we had 13 fire districts, 100 different people out there being trained on it. So before we put it on the road, we want to make sure that everybody understands start to finish what we need to do in those situations. We actually did one as well out in the Ravina area a couple of months ago. Same thing. That demo unit that we had, put it on the lift, got everybody familiar with it. It doesn't have to have a bus deployed for us to come out and train anybody that's involved. That's it. Anybody have any questions? I know we went through it kind of quick. There is a lot of information to take in. As I said before, we still sell gasoline, we still sell diesel, we still sell propane, just gearing up for what's coming.
Okay, Jeromy, you said that there are 14 batteries that are used at the same time.
Correct.
Now, are those all 155 kilowatt batteries?
That's a good question. So combined, all 14 batteries make up 155 kilowatt hour battery capacity.
Okay, it's combined. All right, and then you also spoke about this bus breaks down and it has to be towed. You can tow this bus, lift up the front of the bus and tow it just like we do with a regular bus now.
Correct. The only thing that needs to be done is just disconnecting that drive shaft from the rear axle. Now you're going to want to disconnect it from the axle itself so that drive shaft isn't spinning. But again, disconnect it, zip tie it up, and you can tow it from either axle.
Okay. And the other question that I had is the regenerative braking. Now, other buses, so you feel the regenerative braking until the batteries reach 90%, then it turns that off. Is that the same on your bus?
Yeah, so regenerative braking will only activate on the bus under 90% state of charge. So when that bus is fully charged in the morning, it will freewheel until it hits 90% state of charge, and then that regenerative braking will activate.
Okay, so that's something that the driver is going to have to be aware of, because that's going to be a noticeable difference when you're driving it and it turns off, I would think.
Absolutely. The other thing that it does too is once you're under that 90% state of charge, driver takes their foot off the throttle. Because it's such an aggressive braking and it slows you right down, it'll actually also activate your brake lights, letting drivers behind you know that that bus is slowing down.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Jeromy?
Jeromy, I have a question. The power steering pump runs 10 kilowatts, and that's all the time because that's always engaged. And the heaters are 10 kilowatts a piece, so a total of 30 kilowatts.
So that on that thermal management system, there's actually 3 12.5 kilowatt heaters. And those are actually only going to activate when there's demand for heat.
Okay.
Which would be pretty regular, especially during the winter, I would think.
Right. So what's going to happen is when that bus is plugged into that charger, we're going to use the energy from the charger to activate those 12.5 kilowatt heaters. Once we disconnect, it's going to use energy from the batteries to activate those 12.5 kilowatt heaters. So again, it's training all the way around from technicians, drivers, making sure that that bus is plugged in all of the time. And we use that software to manage when we want it to charge, when we don't want it to charge, making sure we don't overcharge and just waste energy. Kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
Good questions.
Are there any other questions for Jeromy? Okay, well, it was a lot of information. And again, this meeting is recorded just like the other ones, the International and the Thomas, and they're on our channel. So we can refer to those as anytime we want to. So if you want to review it, feel free.
Perfect.
Questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeromy, for your presentation. I'm sure, a lot of people that couldn't make the meeting will be tuning in and getting the information from that. And I think it's kind of neat how quickly it has changed, just the electric buses, just from the first generation when we first started to hear about it up until now. You hear about different safety measures that have come out in different, now we're talking about towing the buses. That was an issue before. So just how things have changed in this short amount of time, I think is kind of interesting. And I'm sure it'll keep changing as we move forward. All right, well, our next meeting will be held on January 18th. On our schedule, it shows that it was going to be a PESHA laws and regulations. Our presenter no longer works for that company anymore. So we don't have a presenter yet. So look for the email. I'm going to send out an email once we get one. And I will let everybody know what that is. So after our January meeting, which, like I said, we don't know, but we're still going to have it on the 18th. We have, again, Bluebird buses will be presenting on their G-Tech bus parts and how they are getting parts for different buses. And I know they wanted to have this presentation, so they are February. Our March meeting is going to be, if we're sticking right to our schedule, is going to be air conditioning. Our April meeting will be oil analysis, and James McBride with Pasanello Fuels will be presenting on that. I know he's getting Shell involved. It's going to be a lot of information at that one as well. In May, we have Roger Harrod is going to be with Matthews Buses, is going to be presenting on wheelchair lifts. And then we go right to June, which is our DOT roundtable. And that's going to wrap up the year. But if anybody has any ideas or a presentation that they would like to see, we can put it together. We have time, especially if you guys get your ideas to me soon for January 18th. Otherwise, we'll move some of these other ones around, but I will keep everyone in the loop on our progress on that. Our ASE study guides have arrived. So I know James Lorette from North Colony Central School District was a recipient of the training and the certification. And there was an issue with the training material that was available online, because that's how we started this out. So we decided that it would be a good idea if we just purchased the books as the Head Mechanics Association, and we will keep a record of these books where they are. So as people can become masters school bus certified, we will get you the books, and they have study tests in it, and we should be good to go. So other than that, does anybody else have anything to add to today's meeting?
Hey, Dan, I caught the last 3 or 4 minutes when George was talking in the beginning. What was he talking about?
George, you want to elaborate on that?
I was just saying that there was a good report out, and it's charging forward. New York's costly rush to electrify school buses, and so the Empire Center, which is nonpartisan, and it's just a good report because it's actually just facts. Nobody's trying to force you to do anything. They're not telling you you're not going to do it. You are going to do it. It's just telling you what you're going to look at, numbers wise. It's a good report. And I'm not the angry electric bus guy anymore, John.
I didn't say you were ranting. I said you were talking.
I'm going to put together a splash screen of that so that we can use it at every one of our meetings. I'm just kidding.
Either one.
Okay, and again, all this information will be on our channel, so we can always tune back into it. As we move forward with these electric buses, we're all going to be in this together. So it's important, I think, that we all communicate, we all attend these meetings just as we get further along into this, the problems that we're having. I know there's going to be infrastructure issues, and we all have to go through this. So that's why we did the 3 major electric bus companies right in a row here. We'll take and see what we're going to do next, the next meeting, and then we're going to move into some other things, but we can always come back and discuss, maybe even have a meeting on different changes that have come up with the Thomas bus, the Bluebird bus, the International bus, the main ones that we're going to have. And with Ford and Roush, maybe we'll get involved in some of that as well as we move forward.
And Dan, if I can real quick, so we also have 4 electric demo buses operating across the state. If you guys wanted to see one at your location, what we do is we'll bring it to you, drop it off. We have a tote with a portable charger with some different adapters that are in it. You can plug it right into a 220 welding outlet, charge the bus, put it up in the air, look it over, ask any questions, let your drivers drive it. As I mentioned earlier, it's just getting everybody comfortable with it. So that's an option. Just reach out to us if there's any way we can help.
Yeah, maybe if one of the districts want to do something like that, we can maybe try an in-person. Maybe we can all get there, and we'll even video that and post that to our YouTube channel, so that I'm sure we all can't leave our shops these days, because that's part of the reason we're all staying virtual right now. But maybe we can make an attempt to do something like that. And the same with the International and the Thomas. Something like that might work as well.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not just electric. We still have gasoline and diesel demos. If you wanted to see them, by all means, just let us know how we can help.
Okay. All right. I don't want to take up too much of everybody else's day, but does anybody have anything else to add to today's meeting? Okay. Then I'm going to close today's meeting, and we will see everybody in January 18th. And again, keep an eye on your emails, because I'll get that out as soon as I get a presenter. And definitely let me know if you guys want to see anything. If you guys need a presentation on anything at all, we can try to squeeze it in here for our January meeting. All right, we'll see everyone then.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, George.
No problem. We'll see you guys later.